Hello and welcome to Mostly Minnesota Music Podcast Edition. I'm Ann Tracy. I'm here with my co-host,
Heather Baker.
and we are here with Johnny O'Neill. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be
Yeah,
here.
yeah, we are excited to have you. We, it's not every day that we have somebody who's played arenas in huge places like that, so we're excited.
Well, yeah, apparently my household is too. Yeah, my wife and son, this is the age of Zooming. They're in the kitchen cooking as we speak here. So if the smoke detector goes off,
Oh,
we're good. The house is burned down, but yeah, yes, arenas, absolutely. Very exciting experience and quite addicting too. So.
awesome. Well, maybe I can ask you to tell, just, I mean, because you have such a history, it'd be awesome to hear. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and about playing with Dare Force. And I mean, you're a stalwart of the Minnesota metal community, the hard rock community.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been around the block a few times, needless to say. Oh, geez, where do I begin? I've played all my life, basically. I started playing guitar when I was 8 years old, and a year later, my best friend, blood brother, co-producer of the record, co-founder of Dare Force, Brian Barb, moved in across the street from me. So he and I have known each other since we were 9 years old. We actually
Wow.
had garage bands in elementary school. We had our music teacher was none other than Bob Dylan's younger brother, David Zimmerman,
Wow.
at Sleepy Hollow Elementary. So it was really a magical place to grow up. And there's some other musicians. I don't know if you've heard of Craig Paquette. He's another Minnesota musician who actually grew up the block behind us. So
Okay.
we talk about something kind of magical in the air, water, and soil of that neighborhood. But Brian and I went on to, we were a couple of young twerps, started Dare Force when we were 18 years old. I had started playing in clubs when I was 14. Brian had moved out to California, came back, and by that time I dropped out of school and was playing full time and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, with the band got started in the late 70s, and we had an 11-year run. Basically played 50 weeks out of the year, 4 or 5 nights a week for 11 years, traveling all over the Midwest, Southwest United States, did dates in Canada, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, played, shows at the old Met Sports Center, which is now the Mall of America, of course,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
shows there and um, all over the place. So yeah, quite a run. So yeah, the band was together to the late 80s, and then the initial group, we just kind of came to a inflection point, if you will, and decided that if by this time we hadn't uh, achieved worldwide domination, it was time to go to Plan B. So actually, I left the music world for a time. I went from a GED to a PhD in clinical psychology from the Ohio State University. So I actually moved out of Minnesota, did my undergrad at Minnesota, entered grad school at 35 and moved to Columbus and lived out there for 8 years. Met my wife
wow.
out there and then came back to Minnesota in the early 2000s. I kind of lead a dual life these past 20 years. I'm a clinical psychologist in solo private practice by day and a rocker by night. So not to mention I'm a parent of a couple of awesome teenagers and great wife. So all kinds of stuff going on. But I came back to Minnesota and wanted to get back into the music scene and kind of knocked around for a while. Of course, the first few years were spent, raising our kids. But when it came time to be able to have a little more freedom, over several twists and turns, I actually ended up reforming Dare Force about 3 years ago, and had a run with a reformed version of the band. due to various circumstances, it was time to call it a day with that chapter. And so Brian Barrett hadn't been in the last version of the group, but I talked to him. I said, well, I certainly, I want to do something. He says, why don't you do a solo album? And I thought, well, it'd always been in the back of my mind, but I thought, what better time to do an album in a midst of a global pandemic? Plenty of time to write material and so forth. So actually, it's surpassed my wildest dreams. I started tracking with Brian in May at his studio, and actually had all the I play all the guitar tracks, including bass in the album, and all the vocals. I had everything in the can done to a click track, and thought, well, I probably could use a drummer. I thought about trying that for about half a second. I can hack around on a kit, but by no means am I up to snuff in that area. So I got a hold of Joe Becker, Joachim, his German name, and a person I had known through some other connections, and got a hold of him and said, hey, Joe, would you be interested in playing on my record? And sent him some tracks. And the next thing I know, he's on board. And he goes, yeah, by the way, I talked to him about maybe having, keyboard tracks or keyboards on a couple tracks. And he said, well, I know this guy that used to be in UFO. And I went, huh? I don't know how schooled you are in British heavy metal, but UFO is like one of the ultimate premier British heavy metal bands. Not to mention they've featured Michael Schenker, who is like one of my all-time favorite guitarists ever. So anyway, Joe goes, yeah, I know their original keyboard player, Danny Peyronel. He's living in the south of France in the Riviera. Here's his contact number. And so the next thing I know, I'm chatting with him kind of like this. And he said, send me some tracks. And the next thing I know, we're flying tracks back and forth from France. And it's pretty funny. We were there's a remake of Revolution on the record, and which is deceptively simple, as many Beatles tunes are. But Danny was working on tracks, and of course there's a huge time difference. So the day that we were supposed to get his tracks, I was up, it was about 4 a.m. I look at my phone and here's a message from him. How does that chord progression go in Revolution? And this is a guy who's trained at Juilliard, by the way. So I'm thinking, okay, I stumbled down to our studio where we rehearse here in my house, and to complicate matters further, we record a half step down. We're not in standard tuning. So I'm trying to transpose this stuff and tell him, here's the chord progression. And he goes, we were messaging back and forth. I don't think that's right. I said, it is, Danny, trust me. Because Brian and I spent about half an hour trying to work the part, finally figured it out. He gets back to me, says, yep, you're right. And but anyway, so that was a thrill to have him on the record. But basically it's, myself and Joe on the majority of the tracks. And I certainly wanted to get a band together too, to play live shows. And I firmly believe once we get past this scourge that we're dealing with right now, and hopefully by late summer, early fall, things will start to open back up. And so I certainly wanted to put a brand new band together as a solo artist. I decided that it was time to become a benevolent dictator, so to speak, and recruited another couple stellar musicians from the Twin Cities area, John Funk on lead guitar and vocals, and then Benny Craig is the newest guy, our bass player. So it was all just a series of messenger, hey, if you want to join my band? Oh, sure. and it was like organic synergy. I don't know how to describe it, but it just clicked right off the bat. So we're actually, rehearsing right now and gearing up to do live shows, featuring tunes off the album, but we'll dig in a little deeper into the catalog too. And we fully intend on putting out another record with the full band too. So, but first things first, we gotta get this one launched and let the world hear what we have to offer. So very, very exciting time. Have you had a chance to listen to any of it, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know I rarely have a hard copy, so I'm gonna say yes, right there. Yeah. First, I have to say, just a couple weeks ago, we talked to a couple that also you are winning the pandemic right there. I mean, you just to do something so creative and have to make all of these connections. That's the best use of pandemic I've heard for a while.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I for one thing, I'm completely, totally addicted to music. I mean, I have to write and record, and not performing has been just really hard. But performing, I love, but there's nothing like writing and recording and actually having something tangible to show for your efforts. And in a studio with Brian, who knows my playing probably about as good as I do, it just clicked. And we were having sessions, every week or two over, about a 6-month period. And but yeah, it seemed to be a good time, a good use of time. And of course, it was a little more complicated with having to make sure that we were, taking precautions and so forth. And of course, recording a solo album without, a full band made it a little easier to do that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's been a really, when I was thinking about a release date, I definitely wanted to do something in 2021. Initially, I thought about, well, I mean, the record has been in the can since November. So, I mean, I could have released it at the end of last year, but, typically, as I'm sure you know, around the holidays, there's a flood of releases from other artists. And I'm, I may have been around with other incarnations of Dare Force, but as far as being a solo artist, I'm essentially, a new kid on I'm laughing saying that, new kid on the block. So I thought, well, let's wait till a new year. And I thought, let's do 1/21/21. Seemed to just have a nice ring to it. So I had a fan point out. He said, well, yeah, it's easy to remember. It's the 21st day, the 21st year of the 21st century. And I thought, wow, that's kind of cosmic. So
that is cosmic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I listened to it and I just smiled right away. The time in my life that I saw the most kind of metal and heavy rock is when they would do shows. There was a time in the 80s where they would have that play with some punk bands, because I leaned a little more to the punk.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But except I knew he was working, I ready to call my brother, because I was like, oh, it's gonna make you smile. It was, it's so much nostalgia for me in some ways, because I just thought, and it sounds awesome. I mean, it sounds just the way it always has. You know what I mean? It's just classic. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, there's always going to be elements of Dare Force, that DNA of Dare Force on the record, but I wanted to do something that kind of went beyond that. And I think the record certainly covers a broader range of moods, dynamics, instrumentation. I mean, there's an acoustic tune. I've never done anything. I've used an acoustic on Air Force recordings, but they have just, a sole acoustic guitar and nothing else. I've never done that before, and having some keyboards, and then I wanted to do some strings with it too. So there's a song in there called Temple that Brian did a really cool string arrangement digitally, of course. But I think what I wanted to do was to, certainly, my roots are in hard rock, Zeppelin and Thin Lizzy and, Guns N' Roses. I love that kind of stuff, but I didn't want to do your typical headbanging, metal record from start to finish. So I wanted to take listeners to some different places and different moods, and kind of, staying loyal or true to my roots, but yet trying to freshen it up and spice it up a bit so that it appealed to, hopefully younger listeners, some new listeners. I certainly don't want it to be a nostalgia thing. So I was trying to incorporate things I learned over the years, but to add a kind of a new twist to things and hopefully capture some new people.
Well, I send it to friends of mine who are in their 20s, and they were like, "This is awesome."
Well, that's exactly what I want to hear.
Yeah, they really, and they really just very much enjoyed it. They're like, "This is, I love," one I know, right up his alley, and the other one, oh, maybe we lost her there for a second, but but it was fun to share it with them. It was fun to share, the music. I really like, Tell Me What You Think You Know. There was just something that I liked about it, and they were liking some of the other ones, and it was, but it must be nice after playing with the band. As you said, this is your opportunity. You get to make all the choices.
Well, it certainly was a different experience. There's, for one thing, yeah, you get to call the shots. I had Brian co-producing with me, and so you always want to have someone with an objective point of view that's kind of saying, well, let's do another take, or let's try this. But for the most part, I wrote all but one tune. 8 of the 9 songs are tunes that I wrote, and I was able to call the shots. And then with playing, I double tracked my own vocals. I tracked with my own guitar playing. So you're able to really develop a really tight sound when you're playing with yourself in that regard. But there is a lot to be said for having the camaraderie of a band, not only live, but in the studio too. So this is just, it's the first chapter, or the first chapter in a new book. And I certainly intend to put out another album with the full band, and I'm really proud of the guys that I've gathered. And this is just the beginning of a lot of cool stuff to come. So
now I know a lot of musicians have built up a lot of those tech skills over 2020. Is this work that you had done before, being able to do everything, being able to do it all yourself?
Oh, I by no means. I've been in many studios and recorded several albums, and I know how the process works. But if to engineer something myself, no. I sit next to Brian, and I know what he's doing.
Okay.
I understand what he's doing, but to be actually able to put that into action, or to do the actual physical manipulation of all the gear and technology, that's something that I wish I had spent more time paying attention to over the years. But when you've got a guy who's got, in my opinion, he's one of the best producers, engineers in town.
Yeah.
And so he's a wizard. So I owe him so much credit. But the playing though too, I mean, it emanates from the person who's playing the strings. If you're whoever is being recorded, what the output is depends upon who's putting it in. So I've been at it for a while, and I think I've learned some things about songwriting, but it's an evolving craft, and it was a lot of things that I learned through the process too. So it's really been quite an adventure, and now there's, with it being officially launched and getting marketed, and starting to being able to share it with the world, and see the impact that other people are replying with. It's really, really cool. Very, very exciting. So
Nice. Now, were these songs primarily written in the last year, or have you gone back into your own? I mean,
no, this is kind of a almost a chronology, personal discography, if you will. The acoustic tune on there, Ode to Mark, I actually wrote that when I was 16 years old, and
wow.
I've had that knocking around for years. And when it came time to decide which tracks to have on the record, Brian had said, well, if you've got that acoustic piece, and that was co-written by the song's called Ode to Mark, and actually it's an ode to two Marks, but the first Mark is the person who co-wrote it with me, Mark Damon, who was a guitarist that I had played with when I was, oh my God, 15, 16 years old. He was in his 20s. I thought, such an old guy.
As an old guy at 22, yeah.
Right. But I had this part, and then he was listening to it, and he says, well, I've got something that fits with that. And so the two of us had this tune that we put together years ago. Tragically, he was killed on the way home coming from a gig. We were no longer playing together at the time, but coming home and hit by a drunk driver when he was in his early 20s. I was 17 when he died. So, I mean, that has been in my soul since that time.
Yeah.
Just a side note too. There's a guitar that Mark had owned. His brother John went on to be the sound man for Dare Force, and so John and I are still great friends to this day. And so I asked him, I said, well, could you bring over Mark's 1963 Firebird for me to track on a few tunes? And so that guitar is all over the record, and I can't even begin to describe the tone of that thing. But anyway, so that was a tune I wrote when I was 16. There are a couple of songs I played with Dare Force. Down and Around is probably, I don't know, 40 years old. We never recorded it, but that's from probably around 1980 or so. There are some brand new tunes. Snake in the Grass was, written just within the past year. Applies to a variety of individuals and open to various interpretations, shall we say.
Yeah.
But that's brand new. Temple's a brand new tune. Red Suns in the Sky was a tune I actually wrote after the initial run of Dare Force ended. I had another ragtag out for a brief while called Rogues Gallery, most appropriately named band. But that was a tune that I wrote while I had that band going, but again, never recorded it. So, I mean, there's kind of a mix of songs, from years ago, and then brand new stuff. And so I tried to, I wanted to take people on, a bit of a sonic journey. So, but it was really cool to these songs are like, okay, it's time now. Here I am, time to record me, So they kind of take a life of their own, take on a life of their own, I should say.
It is, as I was listening to it, my notes are like, okay, that's a song about a jerk. That's kind of a love song. That's a very emotional. I like, I've got something for every, it really does hit so many emotions or moments or, factions of life. Where you're like, oh yeah, I'd listen to this one if I was mad. I'd listen to the,
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, I wanted to have more texture and dynamics than I treasure the stuff that we put out with Dare Force years ago, but there's a place and time for everything, and if an artist is going to continue to create, you have to continue to evolve and try and incorporate some new ingredients. So I wanted to do something that still appealed to people that came out and saw me play years ago, but definitely wanted to put out something that would appeal to a wider and younger audience. I probably have two of my harshest critics are my two teenagers, and
always.
So it's kind of ironic. My son is into everything from Pink Floyd to Nirvana to oh my gosh, he's all over the place. And then hip hop, which truth be told, it's not exactly my cup
I was
of tea,
gonna.
but I certainly respect. I mean, there's certainly some really talented artists in that genre too. But I wanted to do something that that hopefully would appeal to a broader base of fans.
What do your kids say? Do they have favorite songs?
Dad, you're playing that again? I mean, can't you put on your head? How many times? Yeah, they're pretty good at keeping their dad's ego in check. They're yeah, between the two of them and their mom, they have a way of it's funny when I married my wife Amy. I had my doctor at the time, and her friends knew about my rock and roll past, so they came up with the moniker Dr. Rockstar, which has stuck. But my family has they're very adept at okay, Dr. Rockstar, pop, come back to earth here. So yeah, but yeah, they're not the easiest audience to please, shall we say?
Well, it's
yeah.
I have one teenager left, but I have had a house full of teenagers. It doesn't matter what you're doing; they're hard to.
Yeah, but it's all good. Yeah, if anyone had told me 30 years ago that I'd be putting out a solo album at this point in my life, I would have thought you need some psychological services, I think. But it really has been quite a treat. And actually, I mean, when you're 20, 25 years old, you think of, someone who's 40, 50, 60, being so old. Well, I saw the Stones. I've seen them numerous times, but I saw them in 2015 at the TCF Bank Stadium, and Jagger was in his early 70s. And I'd seen the first show I saw of theirs was back in 78, the Some Girls tour.
Wow.
And I think the show that I saw in 2015 was the best show that I ever seen them put on. I was just blown away. And I thought, well, if a guy who's in his 70s can get out there and put on, phenomenal performance, just nonstop movement for 2.5 hours, you're not that old. Come on, dude. You still got some gas in the tank. And the other group I draw some inspiration from, and they've got a brand new record out, AC/DC, and it's unbelievable. stamina those guys have, and they're all in their mid-70s. I'd go see them in a heartbeat, and I'll tell you, they'd put to shame a lot of bands in their 20s and 30s. So I'm going to continue to do this as long as I'm have my wits about me and can physically function. So I hope to be at it for a while. So
I was going to say, I think it keeps you young, and you definitely brought us back to the 80s when life was awesome and rocky. I was having fun listening to it, at least, too.
yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there certainly is, like I said, there's going to be a little bit of an 80s vibe to it, but hopefully it's something that younger, newer audiences will get into as well. And it's kind of funny. I think there are a lot of, I've got my good buddy Steve here. You probably can't see him.
I can see the nose.
Steve is 110 pounds of fun. He's a purebred Great Pyrenees, and he's my buddy. But anyway, there are. It's surprising, you do hear from people, guitarists and other people in their 20s that are discovering. I mean, of course, I'm a little biased, but I think some of the greatest years of rock were from early 70s to the mid 80s. I think if you want to call it the golden era, so to speak. And I think since then things have become kind of formulaic. Certainly radio has changed completely. The record industry, one thing about Steve, once you start petting him, you can't stop. But the music industry has changed so much over time. The days of hearing deep cuts on an FM station or a whole, God forbid, the whole side of an album, those days are long gone. So I think there's, in some ways, I'll refer to them as kids, young adults are kind of rediscovering a history that really is the foundation for everything that's followed since then. And it's kind of gotten watered down in some respects, I think. So they're kind of going back and finding out, the real deal. I mean, how, what can you say about, a Zeppelin record? I mean, you maybe, check out Greta Van Fleet or something, but I'm sorry, it's not quite the same, but anyway, they're a good band too.
remarkable similarities between the, yes. Yeah.
I think the singer had once said that he didn't really listen to Plant too much, and I just had to guffaw at that. But yeah, I think he said Steven Tyler was, kind of a big influence. But I mean, if you see any of, I've seen some clips of theirs, and I mean, it's just almost a tribute band.
Oh, I saw them live once. Yeah, it's
Yeah. Yeah, and which is it. When I first heard them, I thought, awesome. Here's some young bucks that are bringing back guitar rock, and you always, there seems to be this cycle of, oh yeah, hard rock's gonna die. Guitar, people are not buying guitars, kids aren't playing guitars, and it's just gonna kind of die by the wayside. And I think at this point in time, hard rock is an established genre, just like the blues or jazz. I mean, it's going to be with us for many years to come. There'll be, cycles where it, kind of falls more in favor and so forth. But to say that it's somehow just going to kind of go by the wayside, I think that just is a myth.
And I think people are listening to music differently now during the pandemic. Certainly, I mean, it's, it used to be that you might listen in the car, you might, we were so short on time. So
Yeah.
you'd have your one song and you'd listen to your one song. But I think people are listening more to full albums now.
Yeah, well, the other issue too is there's just so many different people making music, or in some cases trying, but you know, any how many releases are made in a home studio these days? I mean, you've got, you know, people, I mean, the technology has evolved where you don't have to spend $100,000 going into the record plant to, you know, produce a record. You can come up with a pretty decent recording with digital technology that it, it's just astonishing what people are able to produce um, for less cost. And so it's really opened up in that regard. It's kind of neat because you have, you know, so many new people creating, and they're just such a you know, it used to be back in the day, there'd be, you know, 4 or 5 big records. You know, you'd wait for the next, you know, Beatles record or the next Stones record, and you'd run to the record store, and it was this, you know, really cool experience where you know, have this album cover and you study the liner notes and, you know,
Oh,
look at the photos and this kind of stuff. And these days, my gosh, I don't know how many releases are put out every day, but it's got to be thousands. So in that respect, it's neat that it's kind of opened up an opportunity. No longer do you have to have, quote unquote, the big label deal to get heard, but yet trying to get some attention when you've got that many um, fish in the sea. It's a little more challenging. So, but it's certainly a far different world than it was when I first started playing.
yeah, it's interesting to think about that. It's and you've talked a little bit about this already, but what come into a song of your own? What do you bring to the table that's different now than your 16-year-old self? Does it feel different? Does it?
Oh yeah. I mean, my playing has evolved. I don't. I think at some point you. I mean, if you're going to be a true artist, you have to develop your own style. And I think at some point, you know, when you're younger, you know, you learn from the greats. I mean, oh my gosh, I mentioned Michael Schenker and UFO, but you know, Jimmy Page, of course, Jeff Beck. I could go on and on for
Yeah.
you know, all the guitarists. Johnny Winter, huge influence. Slide guitar is something that is prominent on the record too. But you know, so you learn from the greats, and you spend time learning riffs of others, and then over the years you kind of mix it up and then add some ingredients of your own, and hopefully you develop your own style with not only the riffs you play, but the tone that you produce with your instrument. And so over time, I think that's one thing I think, you know, if people hear a song of mine, I think my style is pretty identifiable. I think people will be able to, they know it's me when you hear it. So that's you know, something that takes time to develop, and you I guess gain some confidence instead of, you know, trying to, you know, I mean, the 80s, there was the advent of the big shredder guitar. You know, how fast can you play? And you have these guys, and they're still out there. They're just, I mean, technically just incredible musicians. You know, Yngwie Malmsteen from Sweden, who's, you know, playing Paganini violin riffs, you know, just blistering arpeggios. But after a while, at least for me, it kind of lost a lot of the soul, and it kind of became almost like a contest of, you know, like breaking the 4-minute mile. Well, how many notes can you play in, you know, this amount of time? And so I finally, and of course, you know, Eddie Van Halen, everyone was just awestruck, and phenomenal guitarist to be sure. But the whole tapping thing, I mean, everyone and their brother was doing that. And I got to a point where I thought, I really respect those people for what they do. That's not how I play. I mean, I admire them, but I'm not caught up in trying to be someone else, I guess. I'm more comfortable in my own skin as an artist, and realize that there are players out there who, I don't have the technical proficiency that some of these players have, but yet to tell them, hey, can you slow down and just play a melody, or what can you do with a slide on your finger? And it's kind of like, I really don't know. So, you gain more confidence in yourself as an artist in your own style, instead of trying to kind of copy what everyone else is doing. And, so I guess that's probably the main thing that's evolved over the years, and continues. I mean, I'm certainly not objective when I say that I think the greatest instrument ever invented by mankind is the electric guitar, and I'm still learning. I've been playing, I don't even want to say how many decades I've been playing, but I'll never stop learning. I mean, there's trying to think who the cellist was in his 90s. Why do you still practice? Well, there's still stuff to learn. So I mean, it's the instrument continues to reveal new things as you continue to spend time with it. So
it's amazing to think of it that way. To the people you see during the day, to the people you see as a clinical psychologist, do they know what you do at night?
Well, I'm not your traditional psychologist. I primarily I do more forensic and consulting work. So I do a lot of legal cases. I work for law firms, disability cases, workers' comp. I do consulting firms that want to hire someone for a management position. I'll do an evaluation of their leadership skills and so forth. So basically what I've tried to do, and when I started out 20 years ago, I was, doing therapy and dealing with insurance companies, and just got to the point where the tail was wagging the dog, and through a series of serendipitous events, found myself in a career of doing things that I never thought I'd be doing when I was at Ohio State. I mean, if someone told me that you'd be, doing work with law firms and consulting to, heads of HR, I've got some, I mean, there are corporations that you certainly would know that are clients of mine. And so I don't have a couch, and no therapist I know does anyway, but I don't even have any therapy patients. It's all fee for service. So I've tried to, I detest insurance companies, but we're getting off.
You and me both. I was going to say, my background is a librarian. I have 1,000 questions, but I won't, because that's not everybody listening is a librarian and have the same questions. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But getting back to your question, I try to, I don't know, keep parallel lives. It's weird. Rocker by night, psychologist by day. So yeah, certainly the vendors that I do work with know about me. In fact, I'll have some of my clients come out and see me play.
Awesome.
But in terms of actual, if I'm seeing a claimant or something like that, I'm not going to say, oh, by the way, I'm about to release this record.
Yeah, exactly.
Check out my music, or I don't have any Dare Force posters on the wall in my office, any Dinah. So
Oh, you should. Well, now you can have some of this. Well, I have to ask, I'm assuming that, I mean, in the name of the album is Truth or Dare.
yeah.
I'm assuming that's a nod to Dare Force, but I should not say that. I should say,
Oh,
is that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, the impetus, and without really getting too into things, but the last incarnation of Dare Force, I basically, with the political situation, the pandemic, I had a very divergent worldview, if you will, compared to the other people I was playing with. And I got to the point where it was basically just wasn't a tenable situation to continue. But I think one thing that we've suffered in the last several years is a truth decay. And there's been so much misinformation, and without getting too political about things, you mentioned tell me what you think you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
the
love
title
that.
itself, it's like, tell me what you think you know, because there is so much disinformation and deception that we've all been dealing with. So I wanted to have, I think, a true artist calls out BS. I mean, that's part, at least in my estimation, that's part of our job is to try and raise people's awareness of things. Not that I'm a political artist, or that's not something that I delve in real deeply into, but there are some elements. I mean, Revolution, I did a remake of that.
Right.
I think, for obvious reasons, but so I wanted to have some kind of a play on words, but the element of truth and dare. I had some other kind of working titles, but and of course, Truth or Dare. This is certainly not the first album to be called Truth or Dare, but it's the first one by me that's called Truth or Dare. And I think anyone that knows a bit about my history understands, some of the meaning behind the title of the record. But yeah, the Dare part of it was certainly a reference to Dare Force too. So, and that's, a huge part of my history too, obviously. So.
No, that's interesting to hear. And it's interesting to hear about, tell me what you think you know too, because I'm particularly aware of that. I'm often listening to music that and you find out it was written 3 years ago, 10 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever. And I'm just obviously bringing the day that's in it to the song, but to hear that I wasn't making it up maybe this time.
Oh, well, if you listen to the lyrics, what I wanted to try and do, and again, I didn't want to make this some hugely political album, and it's an interesting phenomenon. A lot of 80s rockers, you'd be surprised. I don't want to get too far afield, but anyway, I think one thing that has been sorely lacking is an acknowledgement of systemic racism, white privilege, and it's undeniable. And it certainly wasn't the history that I was taught growing up. So if you listen to the lyrics, there are a number of events that happened in this country that a lot of people until recently didn't even know about. The Tulsa, Oklahoma bombing of 1921, on Black Wall Street, 300 some people killed, murdered, the hanging of Emmett Till, a 14-year-old, just awful stuff. But I also wanted to kind of shed a little bit of light here on Minnesota as well, because we take pride in being such a progressive, forward-thinking state. Well, sorry, but there were redlining districts in the city of Lakes, as the lyric goes, that forbade anyone of color to buy or sell real estate, that were in effect up until, I don't know, 50s and 60s. There's still, you'd look in the abstracts of a property that you'd buy, and you'd see these contracts stating that unless you're of, you know, Northern European descent, sorry, you can't cross the gate. And it was something that I had just heard. I was watching a PBS show this past year, and they had a special on it, and I started crying. I mean, I just was so just shocked and horrified by that, and to think that that could actually happen. I mean, I was, you know, born in Minneapolis. I grew up in Golden Valley. You know, I'm a Minnesota born and bred kid, and to think that that happened in my hometown just stunned me. And I think a lot of people aren't even aware of that. And so I wanted to bring that to light. I thought it was important that people are aware of that, acknowledge that. But
well, as you said, you're not an overtly political band. I mean, some people specifically want to talk, but the time is here, and it's a good way to reach people.
Well, I mean, I think to not have some acknowledgement of those kinds of things. I mean, you know, yeah, there's a range of topics. You know, there's a tune coming for you, which is pretty much, you know, your good old the drives of most red-blooded American males. I mean, it's nothing too sophisticated lyrically by any means. But you know, there are other songs.
To credit, I did write love song next to my description of that one. Generously wrote love song.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, there's, you know, there are tunes that reflect more of the basic drives we all have, shall we say. But I did want to do something with some other tunes that, you know, was a little bit beyond that. Again, kind of, you know, instead of just making your typical headbanging, let's go party, man, you know, record, I wanted something that had a little more depth to it. But yet at the same time, it wasn't like I was gonna, you know, try and make, you know, some real political record, or, you know, but there's a couple of elements of that.
Well, and I think you can reach a lot of people when you do it that way. So I think that's fantastic. It's a good way to, yeah, people who are going to buy political albums, you know, it's, and you can't not talk about it the same way in the 60s. They couldn't not talk about stuff.
Well, that's just it. I mean, you know, I have 2 teenagers, and I mean, this past year, I mean, to be living through this time, how could you not at least reference it to some extent, everything we've gone through? I mean, you'd have to be living with blinders on to not acknowledge. I mean, you know, thank God we still have a government right now. I mean, we were a fraction away from a coup.
Yep.
I mean, you know, I'll put it right out there. So, you know, I think to not acknowledge that kind of thing is just to deny reality. And so you stick your neck out a bit. I mean, there are people I've known for years that have a divergent view from mine, and, you know, that's their choice. But I'm not gonna. I'm a stubborn Irishman. I don't. I'm not very good at being quiet. So, you know, I am gonna speak up when I think it's important to do so. But what I really want to do, though, is let the music do the talking. That's the main thing. So.
Well, and because you have music that reaches ages down to, you know, you're able to have an impact that wouldn't otherwise have, with people who
Well, I'm hoping
sneak
so.
it to them. sneak the
Yeah.
messages to them through the good music, you know?
Yeah, I'm hoping so. Yeah. And that's, that's the main thing. I mean, I certainly want, I want people to feel good or bring some joy or enjoyment. I mean, we've all been through the ringer this past year, the past 4 years, and I just
Mm.
I want to do something that you know would bring some joy and get people moving and something that they can kind of get their minds away from all the crap
Yeah.
that we've had to deal with and just enjoy some, there certainly is an element of good old kick-ass rock and roll, and that's going to be the case in whatever kind of music I put out. So
You
yeah.
said the moment it started, I just smiled. I was like, ah, nice. This is nice.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Johnny, tell us where people can find you online.
Well, I have my website, johnnyoneil.com. That's just JOHNNYONEIL.com. No apostrophe. There's, being an Irishman, I'm really, I feel discriminated against with apostrophe abuse, but that's the world in which we live. So I had to ditch the apostrophe for the website, but that's the website. I'm also on Facebook, Johnny O'Neill Official. You can find me there. The record has been released everywhere. I mean, you can find it on Amazon, iTunes, Spotify,
yeah.
You name it, it's out there. But there's also a site called Bandcamp, bandcamp.com, and you can order the physical disc that way. It's been such a whirlwind, and there's so many things to do when basically you're your own label. So I still have to get out and hit the streets a bit and get in touch with some local stores, which I fully intend to do. But right now it's online and band. In terms of getting the physical CD, Bandcamp is the place to do that. But you can also do digital downloads and streaming with all the usual sites.
The usual. And it is a fun one to listen to from start to end. You know, to take the time to listen to all of it, because it's.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's what I'm hoping. Yeah, I mean, these days, it's so funny, people will download a single and, the idea of listening to a whole album, but I think there is kind of I mentioned a sonic journey, and I think from start to finish, there's, a reason for the tracks to be in the order that they're in. And, if someone does take the time to listen to the record, I think they'll get much more out of it than just, picking up, one tune or whatever. And that's fine. Don't get me wrong.
Right,
I'm more than happy, if someone wants to, download a track that they really like. But I think, the real, to get the most out of it, the full experience is to listen to the work in its entirety. So
finish the book. To read it all the way to the end. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. No cliff notes. Yeah.
Right. Jenny, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It really is I'm going to share it with my brother next.
Yeah. Well, Anne and Heather, it's been my pleasure, and I really appreciate you invited me to the show, and it's been a lot of fun talking with you folks, and hopefully we'll have some new listeners come on board, and thank you for having me.
Well, and here's hoping that before this time next year, we're able to see you live, see you perform live.
Absolutely.
That would be fun. That would.
Yeah. And on the website, there'll be details to come. That's constantly being updated and stuff. So, I mean, I fully intend to, once we've get the vaccines rolling and it's safe to, you know, get out and rock and roll, we'll be doing it. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, take care, folks. Have a great evening.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye.